Aldeki də virtualidə də vicəli. Dida az Kristəğimə ki, did xarşlar Kristəğimə to da sakvirələr ya sakvenişəni da vermişən belə arsınatlisvitsənə sakvirələr ataşında.
What happens when a lone monk challenges one of the most powerful regimes in modern history? Meet Saint Gabriel, a man who set the ultimate example of fearless faith by committing an act so daring it shocked an entire nation. This is the story of a monk who burned Lenin's portrait in the heart of communist Georgia and lived to tell the tale, a story of faith, madness, and mystery. Stay tuned to uncover the incredible journey of Saint Gabriel, a modern martyr whose actions changed the spiritual landscape of a country. Saint Gabriel, born Gabriel Urgabadze in 1929 in Tbilisi, Georgia, was destined for greatness from a young age. Growing up in a devout Christian family during the oppressive Soviet era, Gabriel's faith remained unwavering, despite the constant threat of persecution from the atheistic regime. His story is one of divine strength and spiritual insight, with many witnessing signs of his extraordinary nature early in his life. Gabriel was far from an ordinary child. Even as a boy, he exhibited strength and wisdom beyond his years, leading many to believe he was touched by a higher power. One of the most remarkable stories from his childhood involved a physical feat that left everyone in awe. At just 12 years old, Gabriel was seen effortlessly lifting massive stones that his uncle, Vasiko, couldn't even budge, despite his own strength. "I saw with my own eyes what the power of God can do," Vasiko later recalled, amazed at Gabriel's supernatural strength, which seemed to defy the laws of nature. But Gabriel's extraordinary abilities weren't limited to his physical strength. His spiritual life was equally remarkable. While other children his age played and spent time with friends, Gabriel spent hours in quiet prayer, seeking communion with God. His neighbors often spoke of his serene, wise nature, traits far beyond his years. Many were drawn to his peaceful demeanor and the deep wisdom he carried with him, sensing that he was destined for something far greater than most. At 12, Gabriel began his formal spiritual journey. Despite the strict Soviet controls on religious practice, Georgia's ancient monasteries remained sanctuaries of faith. Gabriel often visited these holy places, immersing himself in the monastic way of life. He fasted, prayed, and meditated for long hours, embracing ascetic practices with an intensity that earned him the nickname Little Godadi among the monks. His commitment to his spiritual discipline was unwavering, and it was clear to all who knew him that his path was one of deep devotion and holiness. When Gabriel reached adulthood, his faith was tested even further. He was drafted into the military, stationed in Batumi, near the church of St. Nicholas the Wonder Worker. Even in the military, where faith was often overshadowed by duty, Gabriel's devotion never faltered. He continued to attend church services and engage in his spiritual practices, even under the most difficult circumstances. His fellow soldiers were struck by his calm presence and deep faith, often marveling at his ability to maintain his piety in such a demanding environment. Gabriel's reputation as a deeply spiritual man spread quickly. His ascetic practices and unwavering faith caught the attention of religious leaders, including a metropolitan bishop who, upon meeting Gabriel, recognized the depth of his spirituality. "You have no need to study further," the bishop told him, acknowledging that Gabriel's dedication to God had already shaped him into a spiritual leader far beyond his years. The early life of Saint Gabriel Urgabadze was marked by extraordinary feats of strength, deep spiritual wisdom, and an unwavering commitment to his faith. These formative years laid the foundation for his later sainthood, and his life would go on to inspire countless people in Georgia and beyond. Gabriel's journey was one of divine purpose, showing that even in the most challenging times, the power of faith and devotion could lead to greatness. In the early 1950s, Georgia, like much of the Soviet Union, was a land gripped by the iron fist of communism. The regime, which promoted an atheistic ideology, was relentless in its campaign to suppress religious belief. Churches were closed, clergy were persecuted, and the faith that had long defined the region was under constant attack. The Soviet leadership sought to replace God with Marxism and Leninism, and the image of Lenin was a central symbol of this new order. During this time, Father Gabriel Urgebadze, then a young man, found himself living in a society that was increasingly hostile to Christianity. Gabriel, who had only completed the 5th grade of formal education, was not a man of great scholarly achievements, but his spiritual wisdom and courage far surpassed the intellectual elite of his day. His profound faith and unwavering commitment to Christ set him apart, and he could not sit idly by as the communist regime idolized Lenin and sought to replace God with the state. On May Day in 1965, during a military parade in Tbilisi, Father Gabriel took a bold and unprecedented step to stand against the Soviet regime. The square was filled with people, and a massive 12-meter-long portrait of Lenin hung prominently, a symbol of the regime's power and dominance. The streets were alive with the sounds of the Soviet anthem, the crowd chanting, and the air thick with the propaganda of the day. But in the midst of this spectacle, Gabriel saw an opportunity to strike at the very heart of the idolization of Lenin and the communist machine. With great stealth, Gabriel infiltrated the Communist Party's headquarters and climbed into the attic, where the portraits of Lenin and Stalin were displayed, looming over the people like false idols. In an act of profound defiance and faith, he poured kerosene on the back of Lenin's portrait and set it ablaze. The flames quickly spread, consuming the image of Lenin and, by extension, the symbol of the oppressive regime. As the fire blazed, Gabriel, with incredible boldness, leaned out of the window and declared, "The Lord said, 'Thou shalt not make unto thee idols. Thou shalt not bow down before them.'" In that moment, the crowd fell silent. The boldness of Gabriel's act left the people in shock, but it also stirred something deep within them. In a society where dissent was crushed, Gabriel had defied the government in a most dramatic and public way. His act was not just an act of rebellion, it was a declaration of faith, a powerful challenge to the atheistic rule that sought to replace God with the state. When Gabriel was arrested, the authorities subjected him to severe torture. They beat him mercilessly, hoping to break his spirit. Yet Gabriel, with divine strength, repeated the words of Christ, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." His act of burning Lenin's portrait was more than just a political statement. It was a profound act of martyrdom. Gabriel had not only rejected the idol of Lenin, but he had also proclaimed his allegiance to Christ in front of thousands, defying the regime's godless doctrine. Despite the brutality of the authorities, Gabriel was not executed. Instead, in a bizarre twist, they declared him insane, diagnosing him with a psychopathic personality and noting that he believes in God and angels. Ironically, the certificate they issued had the number 666, an almost prophetic reference to the evil forces he was fighting against. His torturers believed that they could break his faith, but they only strengthened it. Gabriel was a living testament to the power of the divine over the corrupting force of atheism and tyranny. Father Gabriel's act of defiance against the communist regime was not just an isolated event. It was a statement of his unshakable belief in God and his deep conviction that the truth of Christ could never be overshadowed by political power or worldly idols. In that moment, Gabriel did not just burn a portrait. He burned away the false gods of his time and called the people to return to their Christian roots. His actions on that day were remembered as a great podvig, a heroic deed of faith. one that transcended martyrdom and reached the heavens. Gabriel had faced unimaginable pain and suffering, yet he rejoiced in the knowledge that he had done the right thing. His bravery and faith were a light in the darkness, a beacon of hope for all those who lived under the shadow of the regime. Saint Gabriel's life was a living enigma, a mystery that both baffled and inspired those who encountered him. His eccentric behavior, which defied conventional expectations, led many to wonder, was Gabriel truly mad, or was he a holy fool, a spiritual figure who embraced absurdity and chaos in the name of Christ, following in the footsteps of the great Orthodox tradition of holy foolery? In Georgia, where devotion to the Orthodox faith ran deep, Gabriel's actions were often seen as perplexing. His extreme humility and disregard for personal dignity led some to question his mental state, while others saw his behavior as the highest expression of spiritual wisdom. Dressed in ragged clothes, Gabriel would wander the streets of Tbilisi, barefoot and disheveled, seemingly oblivious to his surroundings. To the untrained eye, he resembled a man who had fallen from grace, or perhaps succumbed to the depths of madness. Some local priests were particularly skeptical of Gabriel. They witnessed his unusual acts, which often seemed irrational, even reckless, and began to question whether he was truly connected to God. At one point, some priests speculated that Gabriel might be an alcoholic, pointing to his apparent disheveled state and the intense, wild energy he sometimes displayed. However, these assumptions missed the true depth of Gabriel's spirituality. Gabriel often wept openly in public, expressing sorrow for humanity's sins and praying fervently for the salvation of others. These moments of profound grief, however, were not signs of weakness, but of a soul deeply attuned to the suffering of the world. He would often pray for hours, his voice echoing through the streets, imploring God's mercy for all people. His prayers, filled with passion and tears, were a living testament to his empathy and spiritual commitment, and while many were moved, others viewed them as signs of madness. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Gabriel's life was his symbolic acts of charity. He would often give away all of his possessions, including the clothes on his back, in a display of radical selflessness. At one point, he even gave away his shoes to a poor man on the street, walking barefoot through the harsh streets of Tbilisi as an act of penance and love. To those who didn't understand, his actions seemed erratic or bizarre. But for those who saw through the surface, Gabriel's acts of charity were deeply rooted in his desire to follow Christ's example of self-sacrifice. On one occasion, Gabriel was seen walking through the streets of Tbilisi carrying a large, heavy stone. When asked by a bystander what he was doing, Gabriel responded with a riddle. "I am carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, just as Christ did on the cross." This type of behavior, at once puzzling and profound, was a hallmark of Gabriel's life. He often spoke in riddles, using symbolic language that only those with a deep spiritual understanding could truly comprehend. There was also the well-known story of Gabriel's interaction with the local church. One day, a priest was preparing for a liturgical service, and Gabriel, as he often did, walked into the church barefoot and in ragged clothes. Without saying a word, he proceeded to climb the steps to the altar, where he knelt and began to pray fervently, much to the dismay of the congregation. The priest, seeing this as an act of disruption, called for Gabriel to be removed. But before anyone could intervene, Gabriel stood up, looked directly at the priest, and with a voice full of compassion, said, "I am here to remind you of the humility that Christ showed. You wear fine robes and sit in high places, but the Lord is with the lowly, the humble, the meek." The complexity of Gabriel's character was further illustrated by his interactions with the authorities. Despite his humble demeanor and seemingly erratic behavior, he was known to challenge the Soviet regime in ways that left many in awe. At one point, when a high-ranking Soviet official came to Tbilisi, Gabriel approached him and loudly proclaimed, The king is not in the palace, but in the hearts of the faithful. Your power is temporary, but the kingdom of God is eternal. Such outbursts, though undoubtedly shocking, were part of Gabriel's larger spiritual mission to expose the lies of the regime and bring people back to their Christian roots. The years following Saint Gabriel's defiance of the Soviet regime were marked by hardship and isolation. Stripped of his priestly duties and labeled a dangerous fanatic, he found himself living on the fringes of society. Gabriel and his paralyzed mother relied on a small state pension to survive. Life was a constant struggle, made worse by the ridicule and harassment of their neighbors who viewed Gabriel as an outcast, a strange man whose eccentricity and unwavering faith made him a target for mockery. But even in these dark times, Gabriel's spiritual mission never wavered. He lived a life of quiet defiance, continuing his ministry in secret. During the day, he walked the streets of Tbilisi, often searching through piles of discarded items. But Gabriel wasn't searching for ordinary trash. He was on a holy quest. He sought out discarded icons, crosses, and sacred books, rescuing these symbols of faith from the garbage and restoring their dignity. Each item he found was carefully cleaned and placed in a makeshift church he built with his own hands. This small, humble sanctuary was constructed from salvaged materials, a testament to his resourcefulness and deep devotion. Though the church was simple, it radiated a profound sense of peace and holiness. Gabriel would spend hours praying there, often through the night, offering his solitude as a form of worship. Through these years of hardship, Gabriel's resilience and unwavering faith shone like a beacon. He lived in shadows, both figuratively and literally, yet he remained a light for those who sought him out. His humble sanctuary, built from the remnants of discarded faith, stood as a powerful symbol of his mission: to restore and protect the sacred, even in the face of relentless adversity. In his outcast years, Gabriel's life became a living parable. He showed that holiness does not require grand cathedrals or public recognition. It thrives in the quiet, unseen acts of love and devotion. And though he was pushed to society's margins, Gabriel's faith continued to grow, preparing him for the revered figure he would one day become. In the final years of his life, Saint Gabriel's once hidden light began to shine for all to see. By this time, his spiritual gifts were undeniable. Crowds of people sought him out, traveling from near and far to receive his blessings, seek counsel, or simply be in the presence of a man many already considered a living saint. Gabriel's words carried an almost prophetic weight. He predicted events with startling accuracy and was credited with miraculous healings that defied explanation. Despite his growing renown, Gabriel remained humble, often reminding his followers that all glory belonged to God. His life was a testament to the transformative power of faith, humility, and unwavering devotion. Even in his final days, weakened by age and illness, he continued to pray fervently and offer guidance to those who came to him in need. Gabriel passed away on November 2nd, 1995, leaving behind a legacy that would only grow stronger after his death. His burial site at the Samtavro Monastery in Matsketa, Georgia, quickly became a place of pilgrimage. Every day, hundreds of people visit his tomb, drawn by stories of his life and the belief that Saint Gabriel continues to intercede for those who seek his help. The monastery's tranquil grounds echo with prayers and hymns as pilgrims light candles, leaving their burdens at the feet of the beloved saint. In 2012, the Georgian Orthodox Church formally canonized Gabriel, recognizing not only his miracles and spiritual wisdom, but also his fearless defiance of oppression and his unwavering commitment to Christ. His canonization was a moment of immense significance, solidifying his place as one of Georgia's most revered saints. Today, Saint Gabriel's story continues to inspire countless believers around the world. His life serves as a powerful reminder that true strength lies in humility, that faith can thrive even in the darkest of times, and that one person's courage can light a path for generations to come. His legacy lives on through the lives he touched, the miracles attributed to him, and the steady stream of pilgrims who visit his grave, seeking hope, healing, and inspiration. His story remains a beacon, not just of miracles or martyrdom, but of a relentless, burning devotion. Gabriel's courage was not confined to symbolic acts, it was a consuming fire. He didn't just burn Lenin's portrait to defy tyranny, he was ready to burn every false idol, every earthly chain, to proclaim one eternal truth: no God but Christ. In a world desperate for meaning, Saint Gabriel's life challenges us to cast aside our fears and stand boldly in our faith, even when the flames rise high. His unwavering commitment calls us to kindle our own fire, a fire that illuminates the path to God, no matter the cost.